The turret sheared clean off, landing 20 feet away. Captain Elias Thorne stared at the wreckage. Twisted metal groaned in the unnatural silence following the explosion. The acrid scent of burnt cordite clawed at his nostrils, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. He tasted bile rising in his throat. 4 men, gone, again. This was the 7th T-14E1 tank lost in training exercises in as many weeks. 7 crews, 28 men. More casualties than some platoons saw in actual combat against the Germans. "Report!" he barked, his voice rasping. Sergeant Miller, his face pale and drawn, approached cautiously. "Sir, all 4 inside the turret are gone. No survivors. Hulls intact, but compromised. Another engine fire." Thorne closed his eyes. Another goddamn engine fire. The T-14, the pride of American engineering. A death trap. He opened his eyes, the harsh desert sun beating down. He could feel the grit between his teeth. "Secure the area," he ordered. "No one touches anything until the investigators arrive." Miller hesitated. "Sir, the men they're saying what, Sergeant?" Thorne snapped. "Saying the tank is cursed, sir, that it's a killer." Miller swallowed hard. 47 accidents, sir. 47. That's more than the Krauts have managed to inflict with their panzers." Thorne pinched the bridge of his nose. Superstition. Fear. He understood it. He felt it too. The T-14. A machine designed to kill, but it seemed intent on killing its own. "Nonsense," he said, forcing conviction into his voice. "It's a machine, Miller." "A flawed machine. We'll find the flaws. We'll fix them. Now secure the perimeter." Miller saluted, his eyes filled with doubt. He moved to obey, the sound of his boots crunching on the sand a stark contrast to the utter stillness of the destroyed tank. Thorne approached the twisted metal. The turret lay on its side, a gaping hole where the gun should have been. Inside, a charred, unrecognizable mess. He could almost hear the screams, the desperate cries for help. The metallic scent intensified, making him gag. He kicked a piece of debris. Damn the engineers. Damn the politicians who pushed this thing through without proper testing. Damn the war. He was a soldier, trained to fight the enemy, not to bury his own men because of faulty equipment. A voice crackled over the radio. "Captain Thorne, this is Colonel Davies. Report." Thorne picked up the handset. "Colonel, we have another incident. T-14E1 turret separation, complete loss of crew." There was a pause. "Thorne, that's unacceptable. The brass is breathing down my neck. They want results. They want this tank in Europe. They need it. The war, it's not going our way." "With all due respect, Colonel," Thorne said, his voice tight, "this tank is killing our own men. It's a death trap. We can't send it into combat." "Those are not your orders, Captain," Davies snapped. "The T-14 is vital. We need its firepower. We need its armor. We need it now. I'm sending a team of engineers. They'll be there in the morning. You will cooperate fully. Understood?" Thorne clenched his jaw. "Understood, Colonel." Davies hung up. Thorne stared at the handset, his hand trembling. Cooperate? How could he cooperate when every time he looked at that tank, he saw the faces of his dead men? He looked back at the wreckage, the silence broken only by the mournful sigh of the desert wind. He knew with a chilling certainty that this wasn't just about faulty engineering. This was about something more, something darker, something rotten at the core. And he was going to find out what it was, even if it killed him. He smelled gasoline. Heavy, unmistakable, even stronger now. Someone was deliberately sabotaging these tanks. Chapter 2. The taste of stale coffee clung to the back of Thorne's throat. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the night poring over the maintenance logs, searching for a pattern, a clue, anything that could explain the T-14's catastrophic failures. "Morning, Captain," Miller said, approaching with 2 steaming mugs. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Morning, Sergeant," Thorne replied, accepting the coffee. He took a long sip. It was bitter, but the caffeine was welcome. "The investigators are here." "Sir," Miller said, nodding towards a group of men in civilian clothes examining the wreckage. "Let's see what they have to say," Thorne said, draining his mug. The lead investigator, a man named Harding, approached Thorne, wiping grease from his hands. He was short and stocky, with a perpetually harried expression. "Captain Thorne, I'm Harding. This is my team. We'll be taking a close look at this incident. We need your full cooperation." You have it, Thorne said. What's your initial assessment? Harding sighed. Engine fire. Looks like a fuel line ruptured. Caused a chain reaction. The turret bolts they sheared clean. It's a miracle the entire thing didn't explode. It did explode, Thorne pointed out. With my men inside, Harding shrugged. Technically, the fuel ignited rapidly, not a high-explosive detonation. Thorne resisted the urge to punch him. The result is the same. Dead men. This is the 7th incident, Harding. 7th. Don't you think that's a little unusual? Harding avoided his gaze. These things happen, Captain. New technology. Design flaws. We'll find the cause. We'll fix it. Will you? Thorne asked, his voice low. Or will you just sweep it under the rug and send more men to their deaths? Harding stiffened. We're doing our job, Captain. You do yours. He turned and walked back to the wreckage, muttering something about military interference. Thorne watched him go. He didn't trust Harding. He didn't trust anyone connected to this tank. He needed to find out the truth, and he needed to do it himself. Later that day, Thorne was reviewing the crew manifests when Miller approached him again. Sir, I overheard some of the mechanics talking, Miller said, his voice hushed. They said they found something strange in the engine of the last T-14 that went down. What kind of strange? Thorne asked. His interest piqued. They said they found sand. Inside the fuel lines, deliberately put there. Thorne felt a cold dread wash over him. Sabotage. He'd suspected it, but hearing it confirmed. Who found it? He asked. Who saw it? A mechanic named Johnson, sir. He's new. Just transferred in. Bring him to me, Thorne ordered. Johnson was young, nervous, and covered in grease. He fidgeted under Thorne's gaze. Johnson, Sergeant Miller tells me you found something unusual in the engine of the last T-14 that went down. Johnson swallowed hard. Yes, sir. I was cleaning the fuel lines and I found sand, a lot of it. Enough to clog the whole system. Did you report this? Thorne asked. Johnson hesitated. 2 told my foreman, sir. He said it was probably just a mistake. Said to clean it up and not worry about it. Who's your foreman? Thorne asked. Sergeant Davies, sir. Thorne's blood ran cold. Davies, Colonel Davies' nephew, the man who was pushing the T-14 harder than anyone. The pieces were starting to fit together. Johnson, Thorne said, his voice hard, you are to tell no one about this. No one. Understood? Yes, sir, Johnson whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Thorne dismissed him. He turned to Miller. Sergeant, I need you to discreetly investigate Sergeant Davies. Find out everything you can about him. His background, his connections, everything. Yes, sir, Miller said. But, sir, why would he do this? Thorne stared out at the desert, the sun beating down on the twisted wreckage of the T-14. I don't know, Sergeant, but I intend to find out. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of gasoline, stronger than before. It mixed with the metallic tang of blood, a grim reminder of the price of secrets. Chapter 3. Thorne spread the tactical map across the hood of a jeep. The rough terrain of North Africa stretched before him, a tapestry of sand dunes, rocky outcrops and narrow valleys. He needed to understand Davies' motivations, and that meant understanding the bigger picture of the war. The Africa Corps is making significant gains, he muttered, tracing Rommel's advance with a finger. The Allied forces are stretched thin. They need a breakthrough. They need something to turn the tide. That's where the T-14 comes in, sir, Miller said, standing beside him. They think it's the answer. They want to think it's the answer, Thorne corrected. But why is Davies so determined to push this tank through even with the mounting casualties? What's his stake in this? Miller shifted uneasily. Sir, I've been looking into Davies' background like you asked. He's got a lot of debts, gambling debts, big ones. He owes money to some unsavory people. Thorne's eyes narrowed. Unsavory people? Who are we talking about? Rumor has it, sir, some of them are connected to the Germans. Thorne felt a jolt of adrenaline. Treason. It was a possibility he hadn't considered, but it made a twisted kind of sense. Davies sabotaging the T-14, creating a crisis, forcing the army to rely on other, perhaps less reliable sources. Sources that might be compromised. Davies could be selling information to the Germans, Thorne said, his voice low. Or even worse, creating a situation where the T-14's failures would undermine the Allied war effort. Make us look weak. Miller nodded grimly. It's all circumstantial, sir. But it adds up. Thorne looked at the map again, his mind racing. He needed proof, he needed something concrete that he could take to Colonel Davies. But Davies was smart. He wouldn't leave a paper trail. We need to find out who Davies is talking to, Thorne said. Who he's meeting with, where he's getting his orders. That's going to be difficult, sir, Miller said. He's always surrounded by his men. He's careful. Thorne tapped the map with his finger. There's a small village, El Kibar, about 50 miles east of here. It's a known meeting point for smugglers and black marketeers. Davies has been making frequent trips there, supposedly to inspect supply lines. You think he's meeting his contact there, sir? Miller asked. It's a possibility, Thorne said. I want you to put together a team. We're going to El Kibar. We're going to follow Davies, and we're going to find out who he's working for. That night, under the cover of darkness, Thorne and Miller, along with a small team of trusted soldiers, set out for El Kibar. The desert was cold and unforgiving, the silence broken only by the rumble of their jeep engines. Thorne felt a knot of apprehension in his stomach. He was walking a dangerous line. If Davies discovered what he was up to, he'd be court-martialed. But he couldn't stand by and watch as more men died because of Davies' greed and treachery. As they drove deeper into the desert, Thorne remembered a conversation he'd had with his father, a veteran of the First World War. War brings out the best in some men, son, his father had said. But it also brings out the worst. It tests your mettle, your loyalty, your very soul. Never forget that. Thorne wouldn't forget. He would fight for his men, for his country, for the truth. Even if it meant facing a traitor within his own ranks. The scent of dust and dry brush filled the air. The moon cast long, eerie shadows across the sand dunes, making the landscape seem both familiar and alien. He knew one wrong step could cost him everything. He was ready to take that chance. Chapter 4 El Kibar was a festering wound on the face of the desert, a collection of mud brick buildings huddled around a dusty square, teeming with shady characters and the stench of unwashed bodies. Thorne and his team arrived under the guise of a routine patrol, hoping to blend in and avoid arousing suspicion. Stay sharp, Thorne whispered to Miller as they entered the village. Davies could be anywhere. They parked their jeeps on the edge of the square and began to walk through the crowd, their eyes scanning for any sign of the rogue sergeant. The air was thick with the sounds of bartering, arguing, and the mournful wail of a distant radio. This place gives me the creeps. Sir, one of the soldiers, a young private named Jones, muttered. Just keep your eyes open, Jones, Thorne replied, and try not to attract attention. They passed a group of men gambling at a makeshift table, their faces grim and intent. The scent of cheap tobacco and sweat hung heavy in the air. Thorne felt a hand brush against his pocket. He whirled around, grabbing the wrist of a young boy trying to pickpocket him. Get out of here, Thorne growled, releasing the boy. The boy darted away, disappearing into the crowd. Looks like we're not the only ones looking for a quick score, Miller said, his hand resting on his holster. They continued their search, pushing their way through the throng of people. Suddenly, Thorne spotted him. Davies. He was standing in the shadows of a building talking to a man dressed in civilian clothes. The man's face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. That's him, Thorne whispered to Miller. Davies, and I think that's his contact. What do we do, sir? Miller asked. We observe, Thorne replied. We need to see who this man is and what they're talking about. They moved closer, trying to get within earshot without being seen. The noise of the crowd made it difficult to hear, but they managed to catch snippets of the conversation. The tank failures are unacceptable, Davies was saying. They're drawing too much attention. Patience, Sergeant, the other man replied, his voice low and gravelly. The plan is proceeding as scheduled. The Allies are desperate. They will be forced to make concessions. But the casualties, Davies said, his voice hesitant. I didn't sign up for this. Sentimentality is a weakness, Sergeant, the other man said, his voice hardening. Remember why you're doing this. Remember the money! Davies fell silent. The other man reached into his pocket and handed Davies a small package. This is your payment, he said. Deliver the information as agreed. And remember, your loyalty is to us now. Davies took the package, his hand trembling. The other man turned and disappeared into the crowd. We need to move now, sir, Miller said, before Davies gets away. Not yet, Thorne replied. I want to see what he does with that package. Davies emerged from the shadows, his face pale and drawn. He looked around nervously, as if expecting to be followed. He walked towards a nearby building, a dilapidated structure with a sign that read Hotel El Kibar. He's going to his room, Thorne said. We need to get in there before he has a chance to hide anything." They followed Davies into the hotel. The lobby was dark and dingy, with a musty smell and a lone clerk behind the counter. "Room number 7, Thorne said to the clerk, flashing his military ID. "We need to inspect it for contraband." The clerk looked nervous but handed over the key. Thorne and Miller quickly climbed the stairs to the second floor. They found room number 7 and cautiously opened the door. The room was small and sparsely furnished. Davies was standing by the window, looking out at the square. He turned around, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw Thorne and Miller. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "We know about your meeting, Davies," Thorne said, his voice hard. "We know about the sabotage. We know about the money." Davies' face went white. He reached for his gun, but Thorne was faster. He disarmed Davies with a swift movement. "It's over, Davies," Thorne said. "You're under arrest for treason." Davies slumped against the wall, defeated. "So I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt," he stammered. "I just needed the money." "Who was the man you were meeting with?" Thorne asked. Davies hesitated. "Two don't know his name. He just calls himself the broker." "Who does he work for?" Thorne pressed. Davies looked at the floor. "The Germans," he whispered. "He works for the Germans." The stench of fear hung in the air. The desert wind whistled through the cracks in the walls, carrying the weight of betrayal and the bitter taste of defeat. Chapter 5. Thorne tasted the dust that had settled deep within his lungs. He stared at Davies, his gut churning with a mixture of anger and disgust. Treason, the ultimate betrayal. He never thought he'd encounter it within his own ranks. "The broker," Thorne repeated. "What else do you know about him?" "Anything. His habits, his contacts, anything that can help us find him." Davies shook his head, his eyes filled with fear. "I swear, that's all I know. He contacted me through a coded message. We met in secret. He paid me to sabotage the tanks. He said it would help the German war effort." "And you just went along with it?" Thorne asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "You were willing to kill your own men for money?" Davies flinched. "I didn't think it would. I didn't think so many would die. I just needed the money. I was desperate. Desperate enough to betray your country?" Thorne spat. Miller stepped forward, his face grim. "Sir, we need to secure the area. This hotel could be a nest of spies." "You're right," Thorne said. "Miller, take Davies back to base. I'll stay here and try to find the broker." "But sir, that's too dangerous," Miller protested. "We don't know what we're up against." "I'll be careful," Thorne assured him. "Besides, if the broker is still in El Kibar, he won't expect me to stay behind." Miller hesitated, then nodded. "All right, sir. But be careful. Hand radio in if you need anything." Miller led Davies away, leaving Thorne alone in the dingy hotel room. He looked around, searching for any clue that might lead him to the broker. He found nothing. The room was bare except for a few cheap pieces of furniture and a stained rug. Thorne walked to the window and looked out at the square. The crowd was still there, bustling and noisy, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded in the hotel room. He felt a sense of isolation, a feeling that he was fighting a battle against forces much larger than himself. He decided to search the hotel. He started with the lobby, questioning the clerk. The clerk claimed he hadn't seen anything suspicious. Thorne didn't believe him. He searched the clerk's desk, finding a hidden compartment containing a small radio transmitter. "Who are you talking to?" Thorne demanded, grabbing the clerk by the collar. The clerk paled. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. Thorne slammed the clerk against the wall. "Don't lie to me. Who are you working for?" The clerk broke down, sobbing. "I work for the broker. He pays me to listen for messages. He said if anyone asked questions, I should deny everything. Where is the broker?" Thorne asked. "Where can I find him?" The clerk shook his head. "I don't know. He never tells me anything. He just gives me instructions." Thorne sighed in frustration. He was getting nowhere. He needed to find the broker, and he needed to find him fast. Suddenly he heard a noise outside, a gunshot. He rushed to the window and looked out. He saw Miller and Davies being ambushed by a group of men. Davies was hit. He fell to the ground. "Miller!" Thorne shouted, grabbing his gun. He raced out of the hotel, determined to save his friend. He dove behind a jeep, exchanging fire with the ambushers. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire and the smell of gunpowder. He saw Miller fighting bravely, but he was outnumbered. The ambushers were closing in. Thorne knew he had to do something drastic. He grabbed a grenade from his belt and pulled the pin. "For America," he shouted, throwing the grenade towards the ambushers. The grenade exploded, sending shrapnel flying. The ambushers scattered. Miller used the opportunity to escape, dragging Davies's body with him. Thorne ran towards them, providing cover fire. They managed to reach the jeeps and sped away, leaving the ambushers behind. As they drove away from El Kibar, Thorne looked back at the village. It was shrouded in dust and smoke, a symbol of betrayal and violence. He knew that the fight was far from over. The broker was still out there, pulling the strings. Hans Thorne was determined to bring him to justice. The taste of gunpowder and fear lingered in the air. He knew that Davies was likely dead, another casualty in this deadly game, but he wouldn't let his death be in vain. Chapter 6. The acrid smell of antiseptic stung Thorne's nostrils. He stood in the makeshift medical tent, watching as the medic worked on Miller. Miller had been shot in the arm during the ambush, but thankfully the wound wasn't life-threatening. "How is he?" Thorne asked the medic. "He'll be all right, Captain," the medic replied. "He's lucky. A few inches higher and he'd be dead." Thorne sighed in relief. He walked over to Miller, who was lying on a cot, his face pale. "How are you feeling, Sergeant?" Thorne asked. "Sore," Miller replied, wincing in pain. "But I'll live." "You were brave back there, Miller," Thorne said. "You saved my life." "We're a team, sir," Miller said. "We look out for each other," Thorne smiled. He was grateful to have Miller by his side. Hay trusted him implicitly. "Davies didn't make it," Miller said, his voice low. Thorne nodded. "I know. He paid the ultimate price for his betrayal." "What now, sir?" Miller asked. "What do we do about the broker?" "We find him," Thorne said, his voice hard. "We bring him to justice." "But how, sir?" Miller asked. "We don't know anything about him. We don't even know his real name." "We have one clue," Thorne said. "The clerk at the hotel said that the broker was receiving coded messages. We need to find out where those messages are coming from." "How do we do that, sir?" Miller asked. "We need to find someone who can decipher the codes," Thorne replied. "Someone who knows about German intelligence operations." "I know a guy, sir," Miller said. "A former code breaker. He was discharged from the army a few years ago." "He's living in Cairo. What's his name?" Thorne asked. "His name is Professor Armitage," Miller replied. "He's a bit of an eccentric, but he's the best in the business." "Then we need to find him," Thorne said. "Miller, I want you to arrange transportation to Cairo. We're going to pay Professor Armitage a visit." The next day, Thorne and Miller arrived in Cairo. The city was a chaotic mix of ancient history and modern life. The streets were crowded with people, cars, and donkey carts. The air was thick with the smells of spices, exhaust fumes, and sewage. Miller led Thorne to a small, run-down apartment building in the heart of the city. They climbed the stairs to the third floor and knocked on the door. A moment later, the door opened, revealing a tall, thin man with a wild mane of white hair and a pair of thick glasses perched on his nose. "This was Professor Armitage. What do you want?" Armitage asked, his voice gruff. "Professor Armitage?" Thorne asked. "We need your help." "I don't help anyone," Armitage said, trying to close the door. "It's about German codes," Thorne said, stopping the door from closing. "And a man named the Broker." Armitage stopped, his eyes widening behind his glasses. "The Broker? What do you know about the Broker?" "We know that he's working for the Germans," Thorne said. "We know that he's sabotaging American tanks. And we know that he's using coded messages to communicate with his superiors." Armitage stared at Thorne for a long moment, then sighed. "Come in," he said. They entered the apartment. It was filled with books, papers, and strange gadgets. Armitage led them to a table covered in maps and charts. "Tell me everything," Armitage said. Thorne explained the situation to Armitage, detailing the events that had led them to Cairo. Armitage listened intently, nodding occasionally. "The Broker is a dangerous man," Armitage said when Thorne had finished. "He's a master of disguise and deception. He's been working for the Germans for years. He's responsible for countless deaths. Can you help us decipher the codes?" Thorne asked. Armitage hesitated. "I haven't worked in years," he said. "My mind isn't what it used to be." "We need your help, Professor," Thorne pleaded. "Lives are at stake." Armitage looked at Thorne, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "All right," he said. "I'll do what I can." The oppressive humidity clung to everything. The distant call to prayer echoed through the crowded streets, a somber reminder of the war's long shadow. Chapter 7 days blurred into nights. The small apartment in Cairo became a war room, filled with the clatter of Armitage's decoding machine and the hushed whispers of Thorne and Miller as they pored over the intercepted messages. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. "It's a complex cipher," Armitage muttered, adjusting his glasses, "based on a Vigenère square with a constantly shifting key. Ingenious, really. And if it weren't being used for such nefarious purposes, can you crack it?" Thorne asked, his voice tight with impatience. "I'm close," Armitage replied, running a hand through his wild hair. "I need a few more hours." "Maybe a few more days." Thorne clenched his jaw. They didn't have hours, let alone days. The broker was still out there, planning his next move. He could be anywhere, preparing another act of sabotage, another betrayal. "We need something more," Thorne said. "Something to give us an edge." "Like what?" Miller asked. Thorne thought for a moment. "Davies was paid with money," he said. "German currency. We need to find out where he got it. Who supplied it?" "That's a long shot, sir," Miller said. "It could have come from anywhere." "It's all we have," Thorne replied. "Miller, I want you to check with the local black marketeers. See if anyone recognizes the currency. See if anyone knows who's been exchanging it." Miller nodded and left the apartment. Thorne turned back to Armitage. "How's it coming, Professor?" he asked. Armitage sighed. "Slowly. The key is constantly changing. It's like chasing a ghost." Suddenly the decoding machine sputtered and came to a halt. A small piece of paper emerged from the machine. "I think I've got something," Armitage said, his voice trembling with excitement. "A partial message." It's a location." Thorne snatched the paper from Armitage's hand. The message was short and cryptic. "Oasis Serpent. Rendezvous midnight. Oasis Serpent," Thorne repeated. "What is that?" "It's a small oasis, about 50 miles west of here," Armitage said. "It's a known meeting point for smugglers and spies." Thorne's heart leaped. This was it. This was their chance to catch the broker. "We need to move now," Thorne said. "We need to get to Oasis Serpent before the broker does." They packed their gear and left the apartment, heading towards the desert. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the sand dunes. Thorne felt a sense of urgency, a feeling that time was running out. As they drove through the desert, Thorne couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. Only the endless expanse of sand and sky. They arrived at Oasis Serpent just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The oasis was a small pool of water, surrounded by palm trees. It was a desolate and lonely place, perfect for a secret rendezvous. Thorne and Armitage hid behind a cluster of rocks, waiting for the broker to arrive. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rustling of the palm trees and the distant hooting of an owl. Hours passed. The moon rose in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the desert. Thorne began to wonder if they had been wrong. Maybe the broker wasn't coming. Suddenly they heard the sound of an engine in the distance. A jeep was approaching the oasis. Thorne tensed, his hand resting on his gun. The jeep stopped at the edge of the oasis. A figure emerged from the jeep, his face obscured by the shadows. He walked towards the pool of water and stood there waiting. Thorne recognized him. It was Colonel Davies. The metallic taste of realization flooded Thorne's mouth. It all clicked into place. The coded messages, the sabotage, the money. Davies wasn't just a pawn in the broker's game. He was the broker. The air crackled with unspoken tension. The only sound was the gentle lapping of water against the edge of the oasis, a chilling accompaniment to the impending confrontation. Chapter 8. The revelation hit Thorne like a physical blow. Colonel Davies, his superior officer, the man who had entrusted him with this mission, the man he had respected. He was the broker. The traitor. "Davies," Thorne said, stepping out from behind the rocks. "It's over." Davies whirled around, his eyes widening in surprise. He reached for his gun, but Thorne was faster. He fired a shot, hitting Davies in the arm. Davies cried out in pain, dropping his gun. He stumbled backwards, clutching his arm. "Thorne," Davies said, his voice filled with rage, "you don't understand. I was doing what was necessary. For the good of the country." "The good of the country?" Thorne scoffed. "You were betraying your country. You were killing your own men." "They were sacrifices," Davies said. "Necessary sacrifices. The T-14 was a failure. It was holding us back. I had to do something to speed things up. So you decided to help the Germans? Thorne asked. Is that what you call doing something for the good of the country? The Germans are winning the war, Davies said. They're the future. We need to align ourselves with them. We need to be on the winning side. Thorne shook his head in disgust. You're delusional, Davies. You're a traitor, and you're going to pay for your crimes. Davies lunged at Thorne, knocking him to the ground. They wrestled in the sand, each trying to gain the upper hand. Thorne managed to break free and landed a punch on Davies's jaw. Davies staggered backwards, his nose bleeding. He spat out a mouthful of blood. You can't stop me, Thorne, Davies said. I'm too powerful. I have connections in high places. I'll be back. Thorne grabbed Davies by the collar and slammed him against a rock. Davies slumped to the ground, unconscious. Thorne stood over Davies, breathing heavily. He felt a sense of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. The betrayal had taken its toll. He heard a noise behind him. He turned around and saw Armitage standing there, holding a gun. What are you doing, Professor? Thorne asked. I can't let you take him in, Armitage said, his voice trembling. He's too dangerous. He knows too much. Are you working with him? Thorne asked, his eyes narrowing. No, Armitage said. But I know what he's capable of. He'll destroy everything. He'll start another war. I don't understand, Thorne said. What are you talking about? Davies isn't just a traitor, Armitage said. He's a fanatic. He believes in a new world order. A world where the strong rule the weak. A world where there is no room for freedom or democracy. That's insane, Thorne said. It is, Armitage said. But he believes it. And he's willing to do anything to make it happen. Armitage raised the gun, pointing it at Davies' head. Don't do it, Professor, Thorne said. You'll regret it. I have to, Armitage said. It's the only way. Just as Armitage was about to pull the trigger, Thorne lunged at him, knocking the gun out of his hand. The gun landed in the sand. Thorne and Armitage grappled for the gun, each trying to gain control of it. Suddenly, the gun went off. Thorne felt a sharp pain in his chest. He looked down and saw blood spreading across his shirt. He had been shot. He stumbled backwards, collapsing to the ground. He looked up at Armitage, who was staring at him in horror. "You didn't mean to," Armitage stammered. "It was an accident." Thorne closed his eyes. He felt his life ebbing away. He had failed. He had failed to stop Davies. He had failed to protect his country. The last thing he heard was the sound of Armitage screaming. The scent of blood and gunpowder filled the air. The moon cast long shadows across the desert, a silent witness to the tragic events that had unfolded at Oasis Serpent. Chapter 9. Darkness. An endless, suffocating darkness. Then a flicker, spark of light that slowly grew brighter, pulling Thorne back from the abyss. He gasped for air, his lungs burning.